If you're looking for somewhere to start, I would say putting your hands in your trouser pockets is something to avoid. It's a red flag. Don't do it. I think it makes us come across as nervous and unenthusiastic about the topic. Instead, try to use open and expressive hand gestures, and I think you'll find that people are more interested in listening to what you have to say. So during my Masters, I received training in motivational interviewing. Now, motivational interviewing is a counselling style which has been shown to elicit behaviour change and help resolve ambivalence.
Now, if you take the first letter of each one of these skills, it spells out the word ORS. The second skill is the skill of affirmations. Now, affirmations are simply statements about anything positive that the counselor notices about the client. And the last word is evocation, which refers to the idea that the best notions, the best ideas about change come from the client.
Motivational interviewing has widespread evidence of its efficacy, particularly in treating addictions.
Suppose someone told you that a fabulous new method of conducting an interview has been invented. A new method of just talking to people face to face that miraculously helps them to overcome their addiction to hard drugs like heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl, opioids. And then someone attaches on to this incredibly difficult to believe premise the claim that this same method can be used with miraculous results to meet complete strangers on the street, meat eaters, and convince them to become vegan.
Now, I'm no expert, but if motivational interviewing can help get people off crack, then maybe it can help get people off cheese.
Would you not be incredibly skeptical of the first claim, the second claim, and the connection between these two claims? For one thing, we live in a society where we are surrounded by hundreds of hard drug addicts at all times. So if there really were an amazing method of getting them to quit drugs just by talking to them face to face, I think we'd be seeing the effects of that by now. There's reasons to be skeptical of that in and of itself. But let's just say there are some studies showing that this new method of, quote, motivational interviewing, close quote, let's just say that there are some studies showing that it's more effective than 12-step meetings, that it's more effective than Christian prayer groups or people converting to Islam. Let's just say there are some studies that for drug addicts in rehabilitation, it turns out this form of motivational interviewing is by some percentile difference more effective than Freudian psychoanalysis. That may be true. You may be able to demonstrate that. Would you not still be incredibly skeptical about the further leap of inference that you could take this method and apply it to meeting strangers on the street and convincing them to give up eating meat, to become ethical vegans?
Now, we use affirmations in motivational interviewing to build a sense of self-confidence or a sense of self-efficacy.
For one thing, the context in which those discussions would be taking place. Someone who is a drug addict and wants help. Let's just take that as a first scenario. It's not the only scenario. Let's just say someone is a drug addict and reaches a point in their life when they decide they need help. They want someone to help them quit drugs, stop being a drug addict. Doesn't that seem to you a little bit fundamentally different from, doesn't that seem to you not comparable to a complete stranger in a fur coat who's happy with their lives, eating meat, walking their dog, wearing a fur coat every day, being approached by a vegan on the street, a complete stranger out of the blue who says, hey, can I show you this YouTube video of what goes on in a slaughterhouse, where your fur coat comes from, where your breakfast came from? Mind if I just don't you think there's something slightly different?
Are you aware that the fur trim on your coat's real dog fur? Did you ask that permission of the coyote if you could kill it?
He didn't. He's not.
I'll tell you what. Why don't you fuck off, man?
Why do I need to fuck off?
Why are you here?
I'm just asking a question. I was interested.
You don't come up to me and tell me about what I can wear and what I can't.
And what about the animal? Why did you tell it whether it could die or not?
Doesn't matter about what I can wear and what I can't. It's none of your business.
What about the animal, though? Is it the business of the animal?
When comparing someone who has, for whatever reason, come to a point in their life when they recognize their drug habits, their drug addictions are a bad thing that they want to get rid of, and someone who hasn't had that realization at all about meat, dairy, fur, leather, being confronted by vegan activists by the heretofore not considered option of becoming an ethical vegan, taking responsibility for it. Don't you think there'd be a little bit of a gap there where no matter how convincing the research may be that your shitty interview method is better than a 12-step rehab method for helping drug addicts quit their addictions, where that conclusion would not be applicable to what we're doing in so-called vegan outreach?
Hey, I'm really sorry to bother you. Would you be interested in taking a flyer? It's about your jacket, because you may not be aware, but it uses dog fur on the trim. So the trim comes from a coyote, which comes from a species of dog. And what happens is they get caught in these leg hold traps, and sometimes they're in there for about 72 hours before the hunter comes to get them. But a lot of these coyotes are mothers, so what happens is their cubs are left alone at home, and they either get killed by predators or they starve to death.
Okay.
Motivational interviewing has widespread evidence of its efficacy, particularly in treating addictions. Now, I'm no expert, but if motivational interviewing can help get people off crack, then maybe it can help get people off cheese.
How fucking stupid is the audience to applaud and donate money to the people who are willing to tell these lies? And that's all I see this as. I see the YouTuber Humane Hancock as someone who is intentionally telling lies for money, intentionally telling lies for clout, intentionally telling lies so that his YouTube channel seems, just like Direct Action Everywhere back in the old days, as if it's guided by the conclusions of social science research. And it's not. It's a scam. Period. What you're doing, Humane Hancock, is a scam presented as a humanitarian cause guided by social science research. Donate now, like, share, and subscribe. Share the link to this YouTube video now. Dead serious. These are not the only circumstances in which people end up coming into an office for motivational interviewing. All right? Other circumstances include being in prison. Have you considered to what extent the comparative analysis of the outcomes of motivational interviewing is looking at people who are sent to a prison or a rehab facility, basically on a court order because the police or a judge sentenced them to, forced them to, where they've been put in a cage where they don't have a choice except to stop and reconsider their lives and the series of steps that brought them up to committing a crime and putting them in prison. And then in that context, they're engaging with a therapist in motivational interviewing. And then in that context, someone is presenting the argument that motivational interviewing gets a slightly better outcome than the absolutely terrible, debunked pseudoscience of 12-step groups. Not all that impressive, not all that amazing, is it? Do you think we would have better results if our method of converting people to veganism was to first arrest them and put them in prison for eating meat, and then in that context imitate motivational interviewing? Maybe so. Maybe if that were the bizarre science fiction scenario we were discussing for so-called outreach, maybe Humane Hancock would have a point.
How much alcohol do you drink a day is a closed question. That could be changed to what role does alcohol play in your life? An open question. Don't you want to move to a safer place? Calls pretty much for a yes or no answer. What are the advantages that you see in moving to a safer place is an open question that calls for more of a discussion.
And finally, in my comment below his video, what I invited people in the audience to do was just to Google motivational interviewing and find out what the fuck it is. Because all it is a flattering way of giving an interview. It's just asking people open-ended questions and giving them a lot of positive encouragement in the interview. And frankly, I think it's very unlikely that would take any of the extreme drug addicts I walk past on the street every day. And I walk past at least 100 drug addicts on the street every day living where I live in Canada. On a bad day, it might be 300, okay? We have battalion strength homeless drug addicts living on the streets here, shuffling back and forth with their eyes sunk into their heads, okay? Drug addiction problem is a huge epidemic. I find it very, very difficult to believe, reading the description of motivational interviewing, that that's going to work for any significant percentage of them. But it will work for some, because some are going to come into those interviews positively motivated to get clean anyway, right? And it's very easy to attribute to the method the positive outcomes when you get them. And if you actually understand political science and social science research, that's exactly what you have to overcome with really solid quantitative methods, okay? Why would motivational interviewing be effective for vegan activism compared to Gary Yourofsky? I'm the world's harshest critic of Gary Yourofsky. Search his name on my channel. You're going to find some videos really giving you analysis, condemnation of what Gary Yourofsky did. Guess what? Gary Yourofsky, one of the most successful vegan activists of the last 10 years. What does his approach look like? Does it look anything like motivational interviewing? Does he give people these open-ended questions and all these bizarre forms of flattery and affirmation and what have you that's built into the motivation? Not at all. His method does not resemble this advice whatsoever. Has he had some success? Yes, with certain personality types. Some personality types respond positively to the get tough attitude of people saying, hey, this is your fault. You take responsibility. You step up. You do better. Tough talking, abrasive approaches to sharing the information of veganism, you can get results with. It's not like I'm appealing to some kind of difficult to prove scientific fact here. If you made a top 10 list of the most successful vegan activists in the last decade, you might come to the humiliating conclusion that this method is so simple, it's so stupid, it can work for anyone some of the time. I don't know how many people have become vegan because of James Aspey. I know that James Aspey is stupid. I know that his method is stupid. But I know that the vegan message is a message so simple, so important, so easy to understand, and so ethically powerful that even if a stupid person delivers that message in a stupid way, it can get results. What I want to do is critique the people who are making these inflated scientific claims on the internet that their method works and therefore you should donate money now. As the budget for DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, creeps over $1 million a year, as the budget for Dr. Greger's YouTube channel exceeds $2 million per year, we have a whole lot of people wasting a whole lot of money on a whole lot of pseudoscientific bullshit when the state of the vegan movement itself is a joke. Why is it a joke? Well, it depends very much on what you have to compare it to. If what you want to compare it to is drug rehab given to offenders in prison, I just don't see how that could possibly be a meaningful comparison. Why don't you take a look at what gay rights managed to accomplish in the last 50 years and then ask yourself if veganism is going to be able to accomplish something like that in the next 50 years. Why don't you look at what Mothers Against Drunk Driving accomplished in the last 50 years, then look ahead to the next few years. Why don't you look at examples of really successful civil society movements, public education-based movements even, right? Why don't you look at the best of the best and then ask what lessons we can draw from that? And those lessons are goddamn humiliating, because the future of vegan is not and cannot be people seeing Gary Yourofsky on YouTube and donating him money, people seeing James Aspey and his half-naked girlfriend on YouTube and donating the money, people seeing Durian Ryder and Freely and donating the money. And you know what, Humane Hancock? I put you in the same goddamn category. You're just the next generation of bullshit artist. You and Earthling Ed.